this session. Remember, we all were broken up into commissions, and we went and we engaged, deliberated, and we came up with tangible, I would say, plans or issues in relation to the rural safety strategy. And I think it's now time for us to provide feedback to the Minister and the entourage. I would like to call upon the first commission who dealt with the status of the implementation strategy. Brigadier Joseph, please come to the front. I think you can come up on the stage and you can present from there. Thank you. Brigadier, please send. You have 10 minutes to conclude your presentation. Minister, with your permission, should we allow for deliberations after the presentation, or we deal with all the presentations and we can allow then? Thank you. All right, Brigadier. It's there. It's under your book. There we go.
Thank you, Program Director. The Honourable Minister of Police, General Tele, the Deputy Minister of Police, Minister Maklale, the MEC for Community Safety in the Free State Province, MEC Bulwane, the National Commissioner of the South African Police Services, General Masimola, the Acting Secretary for the Civilian Secretariat for Police, Mr. Amaru, all Deputy National Commissioners, all Provincial Commissioners, all divisional commissioners, all generals present, all invited guests, all protocol observed. Good afternoon, Minister. I'm Brigadier Mark Joseph from the Gauteng province, and I've been tasked by Commission 1 to present our Commission's decisions on the implementation of the Rural Safety Summit, of the Rural Safety Strategy. Our introduction to the topic, we had various presentations, various inputs, but the summary of the presentations and discussions, the reflection on the rural safety strategy in relation to the topic, recommendations towards the formulation of resolutions of the summit. This Commission reflected on the status of the implementation of the rural safety strategy. The Commission was chaired by Major General Espinar, and is being presented by Brigadier Joseph. The following presentations were taken into consideration when we were formulating our decisions. Colonel Miller from the Division Visible Policing presented the status and the implementation of the strategy. Mr. B. Shumba, the Acting Director for Farm Worker Development in the Western Cape from the Department of Agriculture, presented us the provincial perspective on the implementation of the strategy as done in the Western Cape. And Mr. E. Woman, the National Board Chairperson, then presented the National Community Policing Strategy to us and the implementation of the community strategy within the rural concept. To just look at our summaries of what we have done, we'll find it in our findings, so if I only have 10 minutes, I will just touch on the important ones as we go through to our decisions that were taken. Our first decision that we took for the implementation of the strategy, having had a look at where we were, where we are now, and the fact that once we had received the NCCF instruction, COVID also started and there were various challenges, but that is no longer an excuse. The ones that we will then present now will be immediate and some long-term proposals. However, it will be for us to ensure that we implement the strategy. So it will be to introduce, we'll have to reintroduce and market the rural safety strategy at all provinces and rural and urban police stations. Realign all action plans at stations, districts and provincial levels with present and future threats relevant to the safety within the rural sector. Minister, if we know from where we started when we in 2019, when we formulated the rural safety strategy, we know things that have changed. During our presentations, the CSI also presented the change in the climate within our country from then till where we are now, and various concepts were taken into consideration on how we should mitigate going forward, and with the implementation of the strategy to make sure all 8 pillars are then implemented and that we do find the outcome of this rural strategy as it is intended to do. To introduce the strategy to all stakeholders, resource the stations so that they can improve their response time. We also said we have to activate an adequate prevention, combating and response system. The first one will be intelligence and analysis, also looking at what we have seen going forward, what our present threats are in mitigation of what we had at that time in 2019, and also looking at the history where we're going to and make sure we can mitigate future threats. Ensure functional rural safety priority committees inclusive of all stakeholders at all levels. We know that the rural safety strategy talks to these committees, it talks to the establishment of them, yes, and I'm sure they are established where they should be at all the stations in the districts and the provinces, but we should relook at this and ensure that all the role players that are necessary and critical in the outcome of this are included. Capacitate and mobilize community police forums, looking at our community and ensuring that our communities form an active part in the mobilization within these rural sectors, and also ensure our communities are capacitated at the end of the day to form part and parcel of our fight within the rural sectors to make them safe places. As we took from our presentations that were given here on Monday morning, we saw that various speakers spoke about the recruitment and the deployment of reservists within the rural sectors. So we're also looking at to recruit and to train reservists specifically for the rural environment. We have to create a communication model where all these services can be assessed simultaneously. The protection of critical and essential infrastructure within the rural communities is also very important. As we know, when we look at the rural safety strategy within the 8 pillars, it gives us the guidelines to operationalize any actions that we receive and to ensure that when we receive intelligence, that this intelligence we could then have a combat function to prevent any further damage and also to arrest offenders that are taking part in this. So what we say there is farming cannot take place when critical and essential infrastructure like electricity, water, telecommunication or roads are destroyed. So looking at where we are now, we're going to ensure that within the rural communities, that this does receive a priority within the implementation phase. We're also looking at the looting and the damage to all infrastructure during public unrest, ensuring that we receive early warnings, prevent this from happening, and at the end of the day, as far as possible, have combat plans in place to ensure that we do mitigate it. Intelligence-led deployments to prevent any theft of or damage to infrastructure. Under our action plan, the first one that we was to introduce and to market rural safety. We say by who must it be implemented. So first of all, it will be the SAPS will be the leading department. Our community policing forums, as we said, which will form a critical role and a link together with us as their partners. Our traditional authorities, provincial and local government departments, organized agriculture, very important, and our state-owned entities that are part and parcel of the infrastructure within those areas, and also in the farming communities themselves. And how are we going to implement it? By intensifying awareness campaigns, mobilizing all stakeholders, and once again bringing them into those forums where we'll mitigate any threats and share responsibilities among each other and hold everybody accountable. And we also said that we're going to have and host provincial rural safety summits within all the provinces. And then it's just the time frames. All of these are short term, so it'll be anything from 1 to 3 months. Then we also to establish an adequate combating response system at station level. Once again, we say the SAPS, our community policing forums, organized agriculture, local government, local business, also very important here, traditional authorities, state-owned entities, and also, it's not appearing on this one, but very important, is within the SAPS, all of our partners, which will be the E2 and other private security industries and other law enforcement agencies that will then form part of the SAPS on our combat and response plans. How to implement it? Ensure functional rural safety priority committees inclusive of all stakeholders at all levels. Capacitate and mobilize community police forums. Recruit and train reservists. And then we say for the first one is short. The second one, to capacitate and mobilize community police forums on medium. With this, we're also talking about the community in blue concept, and there was a lot of deliberation about that, on how we bring them in and also align all of our present community structures within the rural communities that participate in your patrols and neighborhood watches, to bring them in under one umbrella with the CPF, so we can have joint interventions there, including the community in blue, and obviously have everybody accountable at the same time. And to recruit and train reservists, we've put it as long-term, simply because the training and the capacitation of these members could take a while. We know that with the recruitment of the SAPS members, that we will spend some time training them, but there is training available for the reservists. However, for the amount that we'll be looking for within these sectors might need a different intervention, and we will also take that to that specific department. The critical infrastructure part of this, and the damage to and the theft of critical infrastructure, we must know that agriculture and agriculture farming equipment and implements also form part of essential infrastructure. How will we combat this? By, first of all, the SAPS will be involved. Once again, our community policing forums, our traditional authorities, provincial and local government, state-owned entities, organized agriculture and private security. Implementation of the Criminal Matters Amendment Act is one of the action steps that we will take, knowing that that is specific to these kind of action. The deployment of essential infrastructure joint integrated task teams to prevent damage to and theft of infrastructure. We know that we've established this under instruction, under NCCF instruction that we received, and in all the provinces it is established, but we should look at this, and within the farming communities where there are identified areas where that are being targeted, that we ensure that these infrastructure task teams are also deployed there to prevent any damage or theft, and also at the end of the day to ensure that we are proactive in that, because as we said, if the infrastructure is not right, we cannot continue with farming, and it will be critical for us to then carry on with that. And within that structure as well, and the actions that will be taken going forward, will have to then deal with demand by looking at all the businesses, your bucket shops, your scrap metal dealers that are dealing with this type of stuff within the rural communities, ensuring that we ensure compliance, and at the end of the day also deal with them, and our state-owned entities help us identify anything that was taken from them. And we know within our rural communities we have our fuel pipelines that are running there, we have our railway infrastructure that is depleted at the moment, and without actions within that as well, we see problems going forward. And both of these are short-term, they're low-hanging fruits, and with the strides we've made in the deployment of the infrastructure task teams, we can then obviously also ensure that our rural communities also then benefit out of that. Our recommendations towards the formulation of our solutions on the summit: the rural safety strategy is relevant and does not need to be reviewed. The 8 pillars we felt as a commission are implementable and sustainable at the end of the day, and the strategy is there. We must now make the strategy work and operationalize the strategy and ensure it works to our benefit, the benefit of the rural communities, and at the end of the day, we will be successful through that. And we must reintroduce and realign the strategy in all rural areas, considering mitigating present, future identified threats. As we said, the threats within these communities, as in our entire country, will change from time to time. We must ensure we have enough intelligence available to prevent it and have a proactive approach. Minister from Commission 1, I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier Joseph. You owe me 3 minutes, and I'll want my 3 minutes at some point. We're going to take another 2 presentations, and after the 3 presentations, then we can allow for engagement. The second presentation will be done by Dr. Swart, which is research in terms of violence and safety on the farming community. Dr. Swart.
Afternoon, Honourable Minister and Deputy Minister. All protocol observed. As you can see, I'm not Brigadier Kupiso. There's a slight change. All right, but nevertheless, we will follow the same procedure, and I think that you've seen the table of contents, what we will cover. So, as we said, Commission 2 discussed the findings of research projects and its linkages to the rural safety strategy. The session was facilitated by me, and we discussed 3 studies. The first presentation was a desktop study, and it was on safety issues on farms and rural settings in a global overview, and that was presented by Mr. Motsepe Matlala from the National African Farmers Union, South Africa. So the study showed that while countries in all continents deal with crime on farms, South Africa faces its own unique challenges, and due to the levels, specifically due to the levels of violence in the rural and farming environments. Delegates felt that South Africa cannot be compared to first world countries, specifically due to the unique context and diversity in South Africa. While the study was informative, most delegates felt that it was not particularly helpful to benchmark against for the purposes of addressing South African safety. I must say that there are certain issues that we could pick up in other environments that we could relate to. For instance, in Saudi Arabia, it was found that where the road networks are well maintained and adequate, the crime in rural environments were less than in areas where the road networks were lacking, whether it wasn't adequate. So the way and maybe the state of our roads is something that we need to look at, but we have discussed that later on as well. Second presentation was on rural crimes and farmer satisfaction with policing in rural South Africa. That was done by Mr. Willie Clack, Senior Lecturer of UNISA. The study concluded that community-focused policing, based on partnership approach and the formation of collaborative relationships, is not only desirable, but it is essential. Although rural safety should be community-driven, there is no to little trust in the police. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. Ensuring trust and confidence in the police is vital, as it leads to theft in South Africa. The causes, motives, and modus operandi, that was done by Cecily Dorewaard Jasso van Vuren of the Department of Criminology and Security Science in the University of South Africa. The study concluded that stock theft units face challenges with the loss of evidence, identifying the main perpetrators, reporting of cases by victims, leaking of information by corrupt officials, proved to link suspects to stolen livestock, and community participation and involvement. So, according to that study, the stock theft units experienced problems with those issues that we mentioned. The study was helpful. Delegates felt that it was very clear about the challenges facing SAPS, but raised concerns about the leaking of information obtained from informers. So what have we looked at? The issues that came out and it was highlighted was issues of governance, accountability and performance that was felt to be inadequate. So we then looked at the strategy and to determine whether that is already addressed in the strategy. In other words, do we have a pillar or something, a plan that tells us how we should address it? And we found yes, both Pillar 4, Goal 1, and Pillar 2, Goal 1 addresses that already. We then looked at the community or police-community relationship that has to improve. Again, that was addressed partly in Pillar 5, Goal 1. The communication is addressed, but the policing part, the actual execution of the strategies at local level, rural settings, needs to be improved. Again, although the trust in the police is lacking, the farming community gives its assurance that the farming community, but also people in the rural settings, will collaborate with the SAPS when their assistance is needed. So although people don't necessarily trust the police fully, they are willing to assist, which is a positive thing that we can build on. So again, in Pillar 5, Goal 1, that is partly addressed in the way that we communicate at the different structures. So, if safety, the rural safety aspect to be community-driven, it also included certain aspects such as the measurement of performance. And there we know that it was addressed in Pillar 2. It shows how the performance in terms of rural safety strategy and police performance needs to be addressed and measured. There was an issue about consultation with the police and communities. Here the issue is not talking to the communities and calling imbizos and so on. The issue is talking to the community and the police officers in the front line, there where the issues are being experienced. The discussion was that when we call for meetings such as this, you get decision makers and the higher up police officers, but we need to get the opinions of the people that's actually doing the job so that we can understand the context within which they work, maybe a little bit better. So we had few recommendations that we felt that we need to address. First one is the Community Policing Forum, and I don't want to continue with that discussion. It was already raised by Commission 1. And then another one was maybe to conduct research and understand how the functioning of the farm watches work, whether it's optimally functioning or not. Because there was a discussion about the phasing out of the commando system and establishing farm watches, and the discussion was maybe we should look at something where we can utilize the unemployed retired soldiers or soldiers, people that were trained before, and get them involved. We also spoke about basic resources and then also the technology. It's good if we speak about technology, but then we must also make sure that technology that we must use for policing should, although we want it to become first priority, it should supplement the basic resources. If we establish a unit, that unit must be capacitated. If we establish a unit, not only with personnel, also with the basic